How to write subject lines that boost open rates. The subject line is your first sales call. In B2B, inboxes are where buying decisions start and where most outreach dies. Prospects skim, delete, and move on unless your subject line signals this is relevant in a split second. If you treat subject lines like an afterthought, you're leaving meetings and pipeline on the table. The subject line is the gatekeeper between your email and the trash icon, especially in cold outbound where there's no prior relationship. A strong subject line doesn't need to be cute. It needs to be clear, specific, and aligned with what the recipient cares about today. Think of it as a mini value proposition that earns the open and sets the tone for the message. At SalesHive, we've seen the best results when teams stop chasing creative and start building a repeatable optimization process. Whether you're running outreach in-house or through a B2B sales agency or SDR agency, subject lines are one of the highest leverage knobs you can turn quickly. The key is pairing disciplined writing with disciplined targeting and measurement. Set realistic open rate targets so you don't optimize blind. Before you rewrite anything, you need a baseline. In 2025 data, the average open rate across industries is about 21.5%, while B2B campaigns average around 19.2% in some datasets. Yet B2B-focused analyses often show averages closer to 36.7% depending on list quality, industry, and relevance. Cold B2B email specifically tends to land around 27.7%, which is a practical target for top-of-funnel outbound. Those ranges are the point. If you're emailing a tightly defined ICP with fresh data and strong deliverability, good can look very different than a generic benchmark. If your cold sequences are stuck at 10 to 15% opens, the subject line may be part of the problem, but so might your targeting, domain health, and sending practices. We always recommend diagnosing the whole system before making sweeping copy changes. Use benchmarks as guardrails, then evaluate performance by persona and segment rather than averaging everything together. The goal isn't to win an open rate contest. It's to generate replies and booked meetings reliably. If you're also running cold calling services alongside email, align your subject lines with the same value proposition your cold callers use so your outbound motion feels consistent. Write for relevance, not cleverness. Your subject line should answer one question: why is this worth my time? That means leading with outcomes, problems, or context the prospect already recognizes, not a vague tease. In B2B, the fastest way to get ignored is to sound like marketing while pretending you're not. Length matters only as a constraint, not a strategy. One dataset shows top-performing subject lines averaging about 43.85 characters, which fits mobile display limits. But another study found 61 to 70 characters had the highest read rate at 17%, and still concluded length wasn't statistically correlated with read rate. Instead of chasing a magic character count, focus on front-loading the most meaningful words so the value survives truncation. A practical rule we use: write the subject line you'd want to receive if you were the prospect's boss scanning their inbox. If you can't explain the "so what" in one sentence, the subject line won't save you. Strong targeting plus a straightforward value proposition beats clever copy almost every time. Personalization and segmentation, the real multipliers. If you want the biggest lever for opens, it's personalization, but only when it's meaningful. Studies and analyses commonly show personalized subject lines can lift opens by roughly 29 to 50% compared to generic lines, which is massive at scale. Even simple first name personalization has been shown to increase open rates by 20% and sales leads by 31%. But first name only is quickly becoming table stakes in competitive inboxes. The real win is contextual personalization, referencing a role-specific KPI, a relevant initiative, a hiring signal, or a credible peer comparison. When you do this well, your subject line stops feeling like an email blast and starts feeling like a note written to me. That perception is what earns the open, and it also sets you up for stronger replies because the body copy can continue the same thread. Segmentation amplifies everything you write. Segmented campaigns can see up to a 14% higher open rate than generic broadcasts, which is why we recommend splitting at least by ICP, seniority, and trigger signals before you debate wording. This is where a sales development agency or outbound sales agency can add value fast. Better list building services, tighter targeting, and consistent execution make good subject lines perform like great ones. A great subject line isn't a trick. It's a clear promise that the next email is worth reading. Proven subject line frameworks we use in B2B Outbound. Frameworks keep your team consistent and make testing easier. Outcome-based subject lines work well when you can credibly name a business result because executives are scanning for impact, not novelty. If you sell a process or service like sales outsourcing or an outsourced sales team, outcomes help you avoid sounding like yet another vendor and instead sound like a practical option. Problem-based and question-based subject lines are strong when the prospect already feels friction in their workflow. The trick is to name the problem without accusing them of doing a bad job, and to keep the question concrete rather than rhetorical. When used in sequences that include B2B cold calling services or LinkedIn outreach services, these subject lines also align well with conversational follow-ups because they naturally invite a response. Trigger-based and social proof subject lines tend to outperform when your targeting is tight and your data is fresh. Referencing a hiring push, a new initiative, or a peer benchmark signals you're not sending a generic blast, while social proof reduces perceived risk. If you can't cite logos publicly, use anonymized cohorts and specific metrics to stay credible without overclaiming. Common subject line mistakes that kill open rates. The most common mistake is writing a subject line that could be sent to anyone. If the subject line doesn't clearly map to the recipient's role, industry, or a real initiative, you're forcing them to do the mental work, and they won't. This is also why generic personalization, like a first name with no context, sometimes backfires. It can feel automated when the rest of the message isn't genuinely relevant. The second mistake is optimizing for opens instead of outcomes. Sensational or overly curious subject lines might increase opens briefly, but they often reduce replies because the body can't deliver what the subject promised. In Outbound, the subject line and first two sentences must match. Otherwise, you train prospects to ignore you for the rest of the sequence. The third mistake is ignoring deliverability and list quality. If your domain reputation is struggling or your data is stale, you can write the perfect subject line and still land in spam or promotions tabs. This is where strong operations matter as much as copy, and why cold calling companies and SDR teams that pair messaging with rigorous list hygiene often see faster gains than teams that only rewrite words. How to A/B test subject lines like a high-performing SDR team. Treat subject lines like product experiments, one variable at a time, measured in clean cohorts. We recommend testing 3 to 5 subject line angles per sequence across meaningful segments, then rolling winners forward into the next batch. If you're trying to hire SDRs or scale an SDR function fast, This process matters because it turns good reps into repeatable performance. Also, don't stop at open rates. Opens are a leading indicator, but replies and meetings are the scorecard, especially for pay-per-appointment lead generation or pay-per-meeting lead generation models where outcomes are the product. A subject line that produces slightly fewer opens but materially better replies is usually the better business decision. Operationally, bake this into your workflow. Document hypotheses, tag variants, and review results weekly, not quarterly. When we run programs at SalesHive, we connect subject line testing to list building, persona mapping, and multi-touch sequencing so the learnings are actually actionable. This is the difference between random copy tweaks and a predictable outbound engine. Where subject line optimization goes next and what to do now. The next phase of subject lines in B2B is personalization at scale without sacrificing quality. Buyers have seen the first name quick question pattern for years, so the bar is moving toward real context, role priorities, company stage, and timely triggers. The teams that win will be the ones who operationalize research and relevance, not the ones who brainstorm more adjectives. If you're stretched thin, it's often more efficient to standardize your approach than to keep rewriting from scratch. Start by defining your ICP segments, picking 2 primary value propositions per persona, and building a small library of proven frameworks you can test repeatedly. If your motion includes telemarketing or a cold calling team, align subject lines to the same talk tracks so prospects experience one coherent message across channels. If you don't have the time or internal muscle to keep testing, we can help. SalesHive has run thousands of outbound programs across 1,500 plus clients and booked 100,000 plus sales meetings. And we use that pattern recognition to match subject line frameworks to persona, industry, and deal size. Whether you're evaluating a sales agency, a B2B sales outsourcing partner, or an outbound sales agency to complement your team, the fastest path is the same. Ship disciplined tests, keep what drives meetings, and iterate.